Okay, so when you hear Stratton Oakmont, what's the first image that pops into your head? I bet for most of us, it's probably a scene right out of The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, absolutely. The champagne, the yachts, Leo DiCaprio screaming, all right.
Exactly. It's this wild, almost glamorous picture of excess and, I don't know, rebellion. It's got this mix of notoriety, fascination, and let's be honest, maybe a bit of revulsion too.
True.
But today, we're really trying to get beyond that myth. We're pulling back the curtain on what Stratton Oakmont really was, which was a meticulously designed criminal operation, executed with terrifying precision.
Yeah, meticulously designed is the right phrase.
We're talking about a firm that didn't just bend the rules. It systematically defrauded over 1,500 investors, siphoning, what, an estimated $200 million directly from their savings.
It's a staggering number, and it underlines that this wasn't just recklessness, it was a deliberate system.
So our deep dive today, it isn't just a history lesson. It's about deconstructing how they pulled it off, how they perfected this blueprint for fraud, the infamous pump and dump scheme. And it's chillingly relevant even now, isn't it? Constantly adapting, evolving. We want to understand the anatomy of this particular type of financial predation because, unfortunately, it continues to plague markets.
It really does.
And that understanding, well, it's crucial for you navigating modern finance.
It's true. You know, while the movie portrays a certain kind of chaos, the reality of Stratton Oakmont was far more calculated. This wasn't just a group of reckless guys going wild. It was a system built specifically to exploit weaknesses.
Weaknesses in what, exactly?
Oculations, definitely. Market mechanics, too. And maybe most powerfully, human psychology. The sheer scale and the systematic nature of their operation, that's what makes it such a critical case study even today.
Absolutely. And, well, to understand the empire, you kind of have to understand the architect, Jordan Belfort.
Right.
You might assume he started as some Wall Street prodigy, but his early career was surprisingly, well, normal.
Yeah, not what you'd expect.
He sold Italian ice on beaches, apparently made a decent $20,000 doing that, and he even ran a door-to-door meat and seafood business on Long Island. Had employees, the whole 9 yards.
He scaled it up, yeah.
But then by age 25, that business went bankrupt.
And that failure, you know, that experience of building a traditional business with physical inventory, slow growth, needing lots of capital, it seems to have been a really pivotal moment for him.
How so?
It seems like it instilled this profound aversion to anything that wasn't rapid, high commission returns. That rejection of traditional slow growth became almost an obsession, you know, an obsession with instant gratification, no matter the cost.
Okay, so if the meat business taught him what he didn't want, where did he find what he did want? His first real taste of Wall Street was brief, right? At L.F. Rothschild.
Yeah, very brief.
Yeah.
And the firm collapsed after Black Monday in '87. That experience pushed him towards a small Long Island firm.
And they specialized in?
Penny stocks. Which, you know, we should probably define that.
Yeah, good idea. What exactly are penny stocks?
So these are securities, stocks, issued by very small, often unproven companies. They typically trade for under $5 a share. Inherently high risk, because there's often very limited public information available. Highly speculative.
Okay.
But for Belfort, this was like a revelation, because unlike the tiny commission percentages you get from selling shares of big, established firms, the world of penny stocks offered commissions as high as 50%. 50.
50% commission. Seriously?
Seriously, it was this incredibly lucrative and critically underregulated niche, a place where someone with his kind of persuasive sales talent could generate immense and crucially rapid returns.
Wow, 50%. That changes things. So by 1989, when he founded Stratton Oakmont, this wasn't some organic growth story. This was like a deliberate construction project.
Precisely. From the very start, the firm was designed as a vehicle for fraud. Even the name Stratton Oakmont, it was calculated.
How so? What does that name do?
It just sounds respectable, doesn't it? Old world, stable. It was a psychological trick, pure and simple, designed to lend credibility to their, well, totally unscrupulous operations.
And his hiring strategy followed that same pattern.
Absolutely deliberate. He brought in close friends like Danny Porush, even his own father, who was an accountant. His explicit reasoning, apparently, was that he could trust and control them. He was ensuring loyalty and, ultimately, complicity.
So it really sounds like the criminal nature of Stratton Oakmont wasn't some unfortunate slip down the line. It was actually embedded in its DNA right from the moment it was conceived, built to deceive.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so to really get our heads around the scale of that deception, we need to understand the environment they operated in. You mentioned penny stocks, already risky. But where do they actually trade these things?
Mostly in what's called the over-the-counter or OTC market.
Okay, what's that? How's it different from, say, the New York Stock Exchange?
Think of it as much less formal, much less regulated. Major exchanges have strict listing requirements, disclosure rules. The OTC market back then, far fewer rules, way less transparency.
So easier to hide things.
Much easier. It was incredibly fertile ground for price manipulation and fraud, precisely because it was so hard for regulators or even other investors to see what was really going on under the surface.
And it was in this sort of murky world that they perfected their signature move.
Yeah.
The pump and dump scheme. Can you walk us through how that worked? It was systematic, right?
Oh, absolutely systematic, brutally effective. It always started with what we can call acquisition. Belfort and his inner circle, they'd secretly buy up huge quantities of a specific penny stock at really low prices.
They'd be made cheap.
Exactly. And often they'd gain secret control over most of the publicly available shares, what's called the float. They effectively cornered the market on that stock. They controlled the supply.
Got it. So they own basically all the stocks.
Yeah.
What next? That's where the boiler room comes in.
That's exactly when the boiler room kicked into high gear. That was the pump. Okay.
The boiler room was the engine. An army of brokers, mostly young guys, would launch these aggressive cold-calling campaigns. They had scripts packed full of false and misleading positive statements. Like what kind of stuff? Oh, baseless predictions about how high the stock price would go, hints about revolutionary new products that didn't exist, fake news about imminent mergers, anything, really, to create artificial hype and demand.
Wow.
Their motto, chillingly, was apparently, don't hang up until the client buys or dies.
Grim. And I assume people bought it.
Enough people did. Unsuspecting investors, lured by these promises of quick, easy riches, they'd flood in. And as they bought, the stock price and the trading volume would surge. That's the inflation phase.
And
Then came the dump. Once the stock hit its artificially inflated peak price, Belfort and his inner circle would sell their massive holdings. Just dump them all onto the market.
making huge profits instantly. Enormous, instantaneous profits. The promotion would suddenly stop. All that buying pressure disappears, supply floods the market from the insider selling, and the price just collapses. It plummets.
Leaving all those later investors holding worthless stock.
Exactly. Left with basically nothing. It was a perfectly executed cycle of manipulation, repeated over and over again.
The real genius here, if you can call it that, wasn't just in making one sale, but in creating this repeatable industrial scale operation.
That's the key.
These boiler rooms, you picture them, right? Cramped, high-pressure offices, brokers sitting cheek by jowl, they systematized the con. They turned legions of young, often inexperienced recruits into, ruthlessly effective tools for financial extraction.
And a huge part of that training was psychological manipulation. They really understood how to lower people's defenses.
How did they do that?
Well, one famous technique was the Kodak pitch. Brokers were instructed to start the call by talking about stable, reliable blue-chip companies like Kodak, something the client knew and trusted.
Build rapport first.
Exactly. Build trust, establish credibility. Only after doing that would they pivot. They'd present the penny stock not as some risky gamble, but as this unique, once-in-a-lifetime, high-potential opportunity.
It's a classic bait and switch.
Totally. Designed specifically to bypass critical thinking and get the person excited and maybe a little greedy.
So the sales tactics were relentless, obviously. But it wasn't just about the pitch itself, was it? The stories about Stratton Oakmont's corporate culture are legendary. The lavish parties, the drugs, the prostitutes.
The debauchery.
Right. But you argue this wasn't just like a side effect of having lots of illicit cash lying around. It was actually a calculated part of their management strategy.
Absolutely. I really believe that. This wasn't just chaos. It was a form of control. This Roman bacchanal atmosphere, the cocaine, the quaaludes, the prostitutes, the really ostentatious displays of wealth, it served very specific strategic purposes for Belfort and his leadership.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What were those strategic purposes? Because honestly, it just sounds like a recipe for complete self-destruction.
Well, first, it was an incredibly powerful motivator.
How so?
The promise of that extravagant lifestyle, it was a tangible, almost instant reward for engaging in criminal behavior. There are stories of managers literally ripping up $100 bills in front of new recruits, yelling things like, "Do you want to be a loser all your life, or do you want to make something out of your life?"
Wow. Talk about pressure.
It hammered home the message. Money is easy. Get it any way you can. It fueled greed and ambition like crazy.
Okay, motivation. What else?
Second, it fostered control and complicity. By actively encouraging, or at least enabling, illegal activities like rampant drug use right there on company premises, the leadership created this intense us against the world mentality.
Ah, so everyone's implicated.
Exactly. It bound employees to the firm and to each other. It heavily discouraged whistleblowing because who wants to rat out the company when you're involved in the sketchy stuff yourself? It created a shared criminal bond.
Makes sense. And the third point.
Third, it just desensitized the workforce, most of whom were quite young. This relentless pursuit of instant gratification, whether it was drugs, sex, or money, it just eroded ethical boundaries over time. Fraud became normalized, just another part of the game to get the next fix, the next party, the next bonus.
That's quite dark. And I guess it must have made it incredibly difficult for anyone to actually leave that environment, right?
You've hit the fourth point. It was a kind of perverse retention strategy.
How did that work?
The lifestyle attracted a certain type of person, sure, but once you were inside, it was really hard to leave. Because what legitimate Wall Street firm could possibly offer similar perks? Plus, employees were actively encouraged to spend their money quickly, flashily. Don't save, spend.
Creating financial dependency.
Precisely. They became financially trapped. As one former employee famously said, "I didn't save any money. I didn't think it was going to end." This trapped them in the very culture that was both rewarding and consuming them, making them just expendable cogs in Belfort's machine.
That sense of being trapped, the constant pressure, it must have just ratcheted up the stakes for every single deal. And I think no deal highlights their methods more clearly than the Steve Madden IPO in December 93.
Oh, yeah. The shoe company.
The shoe company. This was really the crown jewel of their fraud, wasn't it? A perfect microcosm of everything they did.
It was a particularly egregious example, yes. And there was a personal connection, too. Steve Madden, the founder, was actually a childhood friend of Danny Porrish, Belfort's main partner.
Small worlds.
Stratton Partners had even provided some early investment to the shoe company. So when it came time for the IPO, the initial public offering, Stratton Oakmont stepped in as the underwriter. They raised about $15 million. But the whole offering was rigged from the absolute beginning.
How do you even rig an IPO? I mean, isn't that usually a very formal, regulated process?
Normally, yes. But they used multi-layered manipulation. First, they completely controlled the float.
What does that mean, controlling the float?
Instead of distributing the shares widely to the public, as is intended in an IPO, a huge chunk of the shares went to a pre-selected group of secret accomplices. They called them flippers.
Flippers.
Yeah. These individuals had prearranged agreements to sell their shares right back to Stratton immediately after trading began.
Ah, so Stratton bought the shares back secretly.
Exactly. This gave Stratton secret control over the vast majority of the supposedly publicly available stock. They could dictate the price because they held most of the supply.
And Jordan Belfort himself, he couldn't be seen to own too much of it, could he? There are rules about that.
Right. NASD rules at the time would have prevented the stock from being listed if Belfort, as the underwriter's principal, owned more than 4.9%, a tiny fraction.
So how did he get around that?
He technically sold his controlling stake to a shell company called BioCap Corporation, which just happened to be owned by Steve Madden himself. But crucially, there was a secret agreement that Belfort remained the true beneficial owner.
So that sale was a sham.
A complete sham. And it was a material omission, a critical piece of information left out of the IPO prospectus, the legal document investors rely on. That made the entire prospectus fraudulent from the get-go.
Okay, so they secretly controlled the supply through flippers and shell companies. They manufactured demand through the boiler room, pushing the stock hard. The price predictably skyrocketed.
Like clockwork.
And that's when Belfort and his partners dumped their shares, making an absolute killing.
Yep. Belfort would later boast about earning something like $23 million in less than 3 minutes from the Steve Madden IPO alone.
$23 million in minutes.
The really critical insight here, though, is bigger than just one stock. This wasn't just Stratton manipulating an existing stock. They demonstrated the ability to take a financial instrument, the IPO itself, from its very birth and control its destiny purely for the purpose of fraud. They weaponized the IPO process.
Wow. Weaponized the IPO. That's a powerful way to put it. A cornerstone of capitalism. Twisted.
Turned into a mechanism for personal wealth extraction, plain and simple.
It's a stunning level of control, really. But even with all that manipulation, I mean, the sheer brazenness of it all, it couldn't go unnoticed forever, surely. What eventually brought them down? Was it like one big raid?
You know, it wasn't really like the movies depict. with one dramatic raid shutting everything down. It was more like a years-long war of attrition. The NASD, which was the industry's self-regulator back then, they were scrutinizing Stratton Oakmont almost from the beginning, back in 1989.
Okay, so regulators were on to them early.
They were watching. Then, by March 1992, the SEC, the federal regulator, filed its first major charges against them for fraud and market manipulation.
Did that stop them?
Not really. In 1994, Stratton settled with the SEC for $2.5 million. Belfort himself was banned for life from running a brokerage firm. But in a classic move, what did he do? He just sold his controlling stake to his partner, Danny Porish.
So the fraud could just continue under a different name at the top.
Essentially, yes. It allowed the machine to keep running, at least for a while.
So the ban wasn't enough. What finally did it?
The noose really tightened in December 1996. That's when the NASD finally permanently expelled Stratton Oakmont from the securities industry altogether. They called the firm one of the worst actors they'd ever seen, citing its obvious disregard for all rules of fair practice.
Expelled. That must have been the killer blow.
It was. The firm filed for bankruptcy just a month later, January 1997. Then, finally, in 1999, Belfort and Porish were indicted by federal authorities. They pleaded guilty, cooperated with the investigation.
Turn on others, presumably.
Likely. And in July 2003, Belfort was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. He ended up serving 22 months. And he was ordered to pay $110.4 million in restitution to his victims.
$110 million. Okay, so while Belfort's story, his personal story, often gets glamorized, the real cost, the devastating cost, was paid by the victims.
Absolutely. That's the crucial part that often gets lost.
Stratton Oakmont's true legacy isn't the parties or the movie. It's one of profound and widespread financial devastation for over 1,500 individual investors. That $200 million estimate we mentioned, that came directly from them.
And it's important to remember who these victims were. They typically weren't sophisticated Wall Street insiders or wealthy speculators who could afford the loss.
No, these are ordinary people, right?
Exactly. Small business owners, working professionals, retirees, people who lost their life savings, sometimes money borrowed against their homes, their retirement funds. It was catastrophic for many.
Do we know any specific stories that helps make it real?
Yeah, there are documented cases. Ken Miner, a real estate appraiser, drew on his home equity to invest and was still struggling to repay that debt years later. Dr. Alfred E. Vitt, a retired dentist, lost $250,000. Peter Springsteel, an architect, lost about half his life savings. And maybe one of the most heartbreaking stories is Louis E. Duquesne Jr., an engineer. He lost nearly $250,000, and tragically, the stress apparently contributed to him suffering a debilitating stroke.
Oh, that's just awful. The human cost is immense. And what about that restitution? That $110.4 million Belfort was ordered to pay back. Did the victims get it?
Sadly, no. The vast, vast majority of that debt remains unpaid even today. As recently as 2018, reports indicated Belfort still owed around $97 million.
$97 million. Still outstanding.
Right. Prosecutors have repeatedly gone after his earnings from his memoirs, the movie rights, his motivational speaking gigs. He reportedly made $9 million just between 2013 and 2015 from speaking. But very little of that initially went to the victims he was ordered to repay.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that while the legal system was eventually able to convict and incarcerate the main perpetrator, Belfort, it proved far, far less effective at actually making his victims whole again.
It really highlights the fundamental asymmetry, doesn't it? In achieving justice for victims of large-scale financial fraud. The punishment happens, but the recovery for the victims often doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, beyond that direct human cost, though, the sheer brazenness of Stratton Oakmont's fraud actually left quite an enduring mark on financial regulation itself. It forced some changes.
It absolutely did. Those aggressive boiler room tactics, the penny stock manipulation, it directly led Congress to pass the Penny Stock Reform Act of 1990.
What did that act do?
Key things. It mandated much stricter disclosures about the risks involved in penny stocks and, crucially, about the broker's compensation, those huge commissions. It also instituted a cooling-off period, trying to disrupt those high-pressure, buy-right-now sales tactics.
Try to give people a moment to think.
Exactly. And the whole Stratton Oakmont case, the sheer scale of it, it served as a major impetus for more aggressive enforcement by the NSD, which is now called FINRA. It led to them being much quicker to impose permanent bans on firms and individuals who showed that kind of willful disregard for the rules.
Okay, so it tightened up penny stock rules. But here's probably one of the most surprising twists in this entire deep dive, something you just never guessed had its roots in Stratton Oakmont.
I think I know where you're going with this. It's truly bizarre.
Right. In 1995, Stratton Oakmont, the firm famous for fraud and manipulation, actually filed a libel lawsuit against Prodigy Services Company, which was one of those early online service providers like AOL.
What were they suing over?
An anonymous post on a Prodigy message board that accused Stratton Oakmont of being fraudulent and, quote, soon-to-be proven criminals, which ironically turned out to be true.
Okay. So Stratton sued over that.
They did. And the New York court's ruling on this lawsuit was absolutely pivotal, but not in the way Stratton hoped. The court found Prodigy liable, not just as a passive distributor of information like a bookstore selling a book, but as an active publisher.
Why publisher?
Because Prodigy actively moderated its content.
Right.
They tried to keep things clean, screen out offensive stuff. And the court said, well, if you're editing and making decisions about content, you're acting like a publisher. And publishers can be held liable for libel published on their platform.
Wow, so that created a massive headache for Prodigy and really any online platform trying to manage user content.
Exactly. It created this perverse incentive, didn't it? If you tried to moderate your site, remove bad stuff, you could potentially be held legally responsible for everything users posted that you missed.
But if you didn't moderate at all, you risked becoming just a toxic cesspool, a terrible choice.
Right, a real bind.
Yeah.
Congress saw this dilemma unfolding, and in direct response to that specific court case, Stratton Oakmont v. Prodigy, they passed something huge in 1996.
Section 230.
Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The core of it, and this is worth quoting, states, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider.
Meaning online platforms generally aren't legally liable for what their users post.
Exactly. It shields them. And the staggering irony here, it's just incredible. A fraudulent brokerage firm desperately trying to silence a critic online to protect its criminal enterprise inadvertently kicks off a lawsuit that directly leads to the creation of arguably the single most important law governing the modern internet.
It enabled the rise of basically all modern user-generated content platforms. Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube. They exist in their current form largely because of Section 230.
It's an accidental but utterly profound legacy of Stratton Oakmont. Just wild.
Truly wild. And what about the wolves themselves? Where did they end up after prison?
Well, Jordan Belfort famously rebranded himself. He became a motivational speaker selling books and seminars based on a, let's say, sanitized version of his straight line persuasion sales techniques.
Still trading on the notoriety.
Absolutely. Danny Porish, his main partner. He later got involved with a medical supply company in Florida that was eventually raided by the FBI amid allegations of Medicare fraud, apparently using some familiar high-pressure sales tactics on the elderly.
Old habits die hard, it seems. The blueprint endures.
It really does. Which brings us to today. The core principles of the pump and dump, exploiting information asymmetry, manufacturing hype, preying on people's greed and FOMO, fear of missing out. They're still incredibly potent, aren't they? Just wearing new disguises.
Absolutely. The tactics evolve with the technology. The physical boiler room full of phones, that's largely been replaced by social media.
How does that work now?
You have so-called finfluencers, financial influencers, on platforms like X, Discord, Telegram. They cultivate large followings, build trust, and then use that platform to push highly speculative cryptocurrencies or volatile meme stocks.
Pumping them up to their followers.
Exactly. Sometimes coordinating buying frenzies among their followers to drive the price up before they and their inner circle dump their holdings. Yeah. The SEC is definitely trying to crack down on these coordinated schemes, bringing enforcement actions.
And you mentioned crypto and DeFi, decentralized finance. That feels like an even wilder landscape than the 90s OTC market ever was.
In many ways it is. Cryptocurrencies and DeFi often offer even more opacity, more volatility, and less regulation than the penny stock markets of the 1990s. It's fertile ground, a sort of new Wild West for sophisticated pump and dump schemes.
And looking ahead, what's the next frontier for this kind of fraud?
Well, you can imagine things getting even more complex. Think about AI trading bots, perhaps being programmed to collude, manipulating prices in ways humans couldn't. Or generative AI being used to create highly sophisticated and personalized scams.
Like what?
Imagine deepfake videos of CEOs endorsing fake investments. Or AI-powered chatbots designed to build rapport and trust with potential victims over time before luring them into a scam. The potential for AI to amplify financial fraud is, frankly, quite scary.
So the technology evolves, the assets change from penny stocks to digital tokens, and the boiler room gives way to the online chat room. But the hunt for the next victim, that continues.
It seems to be a constant.
The wolf may have changed its fur, its tactics, but its fundamental nature remains chillingly the same.
Wow. We've covered quite a journey today, haven't we? From Jordan Belfort's early ambitions and the ruthless mechanics of Stratton Oakmont's boiler room, the system.
Through the shocking manipulation of the Steve Madden IPO and the really devastating human cost for the victims. Then we saw the firm's completely unintended but profound impact on internet law with Section 230.
The great irony.
Leading all the way to the enduring evolution of its fraud blueprint in our modern digital age. So it leaves us with a thought, maybe a provocative one for you, the listener. Considering this rapid evolution of technology from AI to new financial instruments, how might you, as a modern investor or even just as a consumer of information online, proactively identify and protect yourself from these new wolves of financial manipulation? Especially when the lines between genuine advice and carefully engineered hype seem to become increasingly blurred every day.